Bon après-midi tout le monde, bonne fin de journée.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm now opening the sitting. Welcome to the Standing Committee of Industry and Technology in accordance with the pursuant to Standing Order 108 and the motion adopted by committee on Monday, November 28, 2022, the committee is meeting to study the development and support of the electronics, materials, and plastics recycling industries. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, and thank you for those who are here present today. I apologize for the delay because we were late because we were delayed in a vote.
And for our witnesses, so yeah, the NDP is to blame. But thank you for your patience and thanks for bearing with us. Even though we have a little shorter time, I'm sure it's going to be interesting and appreciated by members. So we have from de l'Association Canadienne des Producteurs d'Acier.
The Association Canadian Steel Producers Association, Catherine Cope-Duen, and we also have Amélie Côté from Équiterre, and also Kirill Mugerman from Geomega Resources Incorporated. So, Ms. Copden, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to appear here today to share the perspectives of the Canadian steel producers on the recyclability of steel and the role that the steel industry plays in supporting a circular economy. First of all, to start, Canada's steel sector supports 123,000 jobs directly and indirectly across the country and plays a strategically vital role in the North American economy. We are a critical supplier to many key North American sectors, including automotive, energy, construction, and various general manufacturing applications. Canada's steel producers make some of the greenest steel in the world, but we're not standing still. Since announcing our CSPA's 2050 net zero aspirational goal a few years ago, we have seen impressive investments announced at 2 Canadian steel plants that will result in industry-wide emission reductions of over 45% by 2030. Canadian steel producers are advanced manufacturers of a 100% recyclable product that can be found all around us, from domestic appliances to vehicles to food cans to bridges to buildings and so much more. I'd like to cover several key points with you today. First, the recyclability of steel. I'll get into that in a bit more detail. The use of recycled steel by Canadian steel makers. The role of recycled steel in our decarbonization strategy, and finally, the enabling role that we play in all metals recycling and the circular economy. Steel is the most recycled product in the world. World Steel estimates that since the turn of the last century, over 25 billion tons of steel has been recycled, which has offset 35 billion tons of iron and 18 billion tons of coal, respectively. Steel can be recycled infinitely without losing key properties. It is also strong and permanent that offers significant benefits to a wide range of applications. Through sophisticated metallurgy, all types of recycled steel can be modified and recreated to make new grades of steel, meeting the exacting specifications of the marketplace. And finally, steel is magnetic, which is actually an important feature. It makes it very easy to separate this highly valuable material from recycling and waste streams. Globally, steel recovery rates are very impressive. About 90% recovery in the automotive sector and heavy equipment sectors, 85% from construction, and 50% from electrical and household appliances. For our part, the Canadian steel industry is a significant user of recycled steel. We presently total our domestic recycled steel consumption at about 6 million tons a year, so we're recycling significantly. Our industry's decarbonization journey will involve a range of approaches and projects, but increasing recycled steel use in steelmaking is one of the pathways being undertaken really dependent upon the company's product and market requirements. For approximately every ton of scrap steel that's used, that results in a savings of about 1.5 tons of CO2 produced. In Canada, Algoma Steel in Sault Ste. Marie has announced its conversion from its existing primary steelmaking facility to an electric arc process that will utilize almost completely recycled steel. While all production routes in the industry use some recycled steel today in their feedstock, the electric arc project at Algoma will see another major shift towards scrap at that facility, and because they're very large, it will impact our 6 million tons by an additional significant amount. Overall, the electrification at Sault Ste. Marie is expected to result in approximately 3 million tons of CO2 reductions per year from those operations. I'd like to spend just a few moments on the role that we play in overall metals recycling and the circular economy. When you visit a steel plant, and I hope you all have, that utilizes a recycling stream, it's like witnessing a very impressive recycling in action. In the recycled steel we purchase, there are many other metals and materials of value, and because of our scale and because of our consumption of the scrap steel portion, every effort is made to extract those additional valuable materials for other applications and really contributes to the preservation of raw materials and this concept of circular economy. We also have a lot of innovation and development going on for high-strength steels and other applications that reduce the weight of steel for the same functionality. Again, another important contribution to the circular economy. In closing, steel is essential to our world today and into the future. I've already spoken about our current markets of automobiles, construction, energy sector, general manufacturing, but indeed, as many economies decarbonize, we'll also see new markets and new solutions, infrastructure that will require more steel, such as renewable energy installations, hydrogen distribution systems, electric vehicles, and much more. Canada's steel producers have the vision to be a green supplier into these important critical supply chains for both current and evolving markets. Thank you for your attention. I'll be happy to answer any questions at the right time. Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Compton.
Thank you very much, Ms. Compton. I'll give the floor now to Ms. Cote. You have 5 minutes. Hello to the members of the committee. My name is Amélie Cote. I'm a source reduction analyst at Équiterre.
Organization with 126,000 supporters and over 22,000 members with a 30-year history. Waste management is one of our key priorities in our 2021-25 strategic plan, and we work to reduce waste at source in a circular economy perspective. En 2022,
in 2022, the organization released the first pan-Canadian study on access to appliance and electronic repair, which I had the pleasure of coordinating and co-authoring. The study was funded by the Office of Consumer Affairs of Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada. I would like to bring 2 main points to your attention today. First, as the name of the committee reflects, recycling is often mentioned when talking about the circular economy, but special attention should be paid to extending the life of objects already produced. In a context of shortage of critical and strategic minerals, the first part of the circular economy must be favored. Extending the life of products and components allow for better use of resources. This applies to metals and plastics already mined and processed, as well as to electronic devices that have already been built. At the Reuse Symposium co-hosted by Environment Canada in the fall of 2022, several stakeholders noted the difficulties in moving from government-supported funding to larger-scale reuse initiatives. Indeed, the focus is primarily on the recycling side. Today, I would like to encourage the committee to incorporate the first circular economy strategies into its recommendation. The second point I would like to bring to your attention is the importance of promoting access to repair through public policies that will extend the life of appliances and electronics. In Equite's study on repairs, we learned that less than 20% of Canadians have had their equipment repaired in the last 2 years. In addition, 63% of respondents of this survey said that they experienced at least one appliance breakdown in the same period, and on average 2.6 years after purchasing the item. The decrease in the durability and repairability of these devices has major environmental impacts for Canada and economic impacts for the population, which we can talk about further if you wish. Equite has made recommendations in the context of the consultation of the future of competition policy in Canada. Better competition, in our opinion, requires a democratization of access to spare parts, tools, and information for independent repairers and for owners of objects. It is also important to have access to the best information at the time of acquisition of an object to make informed decisions. Canada could learn from the example of repairability index in France, which will be replaced by a durability index, and which makes it possible to find out about the lifespan and repairability of an object at the time of its purchase. A sustainability or durability index could be implemented on the Canadian scale and could be a great step to support the development of the circular economy in Canada. The cost of repair is the second impediment identified in our study. To address this, various eco-fiscal measures could be implemented. For example, they could be tax credits, a repair fund inspired by the French example, and even tax credits for repair. It would be interesting to analyze the potential impacts of these measures on the decision to repair or not to repair an appliance to ensure that they achieve this objective. A brief has been provided to the committee and will allow you to explore these issues further. I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have about the issues discussed in this presentation. Thank you for listening. Thank you very much, Ms. Cote. Mr. Murumen, you have the floor.
Be here today to discuss this super important and critical aspect of circular economy. Geomega is a developer of innovative processing technologies. We are focused on extracting metals from existing and new sources of material. The demand for traditional industrial metals such as steel, copper, and aluminum is constantly increasing due to new manufacturing and technological developments, and of course, population growth. Traditional recycling of these metals, or simple streams recycling, such as consumer end-of-life products and manufacturing waste recycling, has been developed over the last 100 years and is well established in Canada and worldwide. On the other hand, the demand for critical and strategic metals is only starting to grow, and simple streams recycling is not yet developed or only starting to be developed worldwide. This is one example where Canada has a significant opportunity to become a global leader in metals recycling using innovative, sustainable technologies. Canada has started already investing in this field and should continue doing so to help its industries develop and establish a significant global presence in circular economy for critical and strategic metals. The developments of Geomega are specifically focused in this field, where we are working on building the first rare earth magnet recycling facility outside of Asia, right here in Quebec, Canada. The magnets to be recycled will be sourced from end-of-life wind turbines, electric vehicles, MRI machines, manufacturing waste, and many more applications from all over the world to be processed into rare earth oxides here in Canada. Contrary to the recycling of simple streams for both traditional metals and critical and strategic metals, another major metal recycling opportunity for Canada is from complex streams such as industrial and mining waste. These complex streams include bauxite residues from aluminum production, electric arc furnace dust from steel recycling, iron ore tailings, copper and nickel tailings, niobium tailings, and many more. Traditionally, many of these complex streams have been sent to long-term storage in waste and tailings facilities. Today, due to the increased demand for both traditional and critical and strategic metals, and the push for more sustainable environmental practices, these complex streams have more value than ever. Once processed with the right technology, new metal streams will be developed to increase revenues of companies, tailings facilities will be reduced while freeing up space for other developments, and many new high-skilled jobs can be created. Canada has already started investing in this avenue and need to continue doing so while this field is still in its infancy. GeoMega has an active program of R&D projects focusing on complex streams such as bauxite residues from alumina production and other waste types, where new streams of iron, alumina, rare earths, scandium, and other metals can be produced. I'm here to answer your questions if you would like to learn more about what other opportunities can be exploited or developed while this field is just being born.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mugerman, and thanks to all of our witnesses. We'll go to Mr. Williams to start the discussion for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for our witnesses for joining today. It's a very important study. Happy to have you here. Ms. Cote, I'm going to start with you. We wish we would have had you about a month ago. We were studying right to repair, and I think it's really great to hear your comments on repairing existing electronics and how important that may be to the future of recycling in Canada. I want to start with maybe some questions around, what I think has to be stated is the belief that it's industry's role to produce a product that can be recycled. And can you maybe just give us a little bit of overview of what other countries or what other jurisdictions are doing to ensure that industry participates in the recycling by producing products that can be recyclable?
Thanks, Mr. Williams, for your question. De notre côté, important at first is that these objects are produced in order to last longer before them to be reused or recycled. So at first, we think that there is a responsibility for the industry in that way. Je vais poursuivre en français.
I'll continue in French. I'll continue my answer in French. So, firstly, I have to say that there are several initiatives in place to make sure there need to be initiatives that are in place to make sure that equipment is durable and repairable. We also need legislation in place, and one that is very inspiring is the law in France that ensured that there was a right to repair. And in that law, we talk about a durability index, which I mentioned very quickly earlier today, and that was introduced in France in 2021. So a durability index is a ranking on 10, which tells us to what extent can an equipment be repaired, and that will be replaced by a repairability index, which will give us information on the lifespan of the object, the capacity to repair it, and its usefulness as well. And we're thinking about electronic equipment. We would like to see if it's possible to change some of its components for the equipment to last longer. And that's a very important aspect considering the current context. So we think that is an avenue for finding a solution, and that is very interesting. And also, the equipment should be recyclable. Maybe in the designing of this equipment, we should think about having smaller components so that it should be less necessary to replace constantly this equipment, and that will have a positive impact on the circular economy. And as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, we usually think about recycling in the circular economy, but we think that emphasis should be placed on reuse, and repair is part of a solution to that aspect.
That is really that we increase competition. So we have companies that can produce a product that is better for the consumer. The consumer will have a better choice or more choice, and they're going to decide where they put their money. You used a word in your opening, which I think was impôt, so taxes. Are there countries using taxes instead of really allowing free market companies to really produce just a better product? Have you seen different ways that that governments are involved with trying to get products out the door?
Oui, la concurrence.
Yes, competition is a very important aspect. So what we observed is that the real impediment to repair is the way the materials or the equipment is designed. And so access to repair will be ensuring that an independent repairer be able to have access to those spare parts, to the tools and all the information, because those are impediments to repair. Now, concerning measures on eco-tax, many countries, including France, included tax credits for repairs. In Sweden, for example, that is a concrete measure that can be introduced. There is also a repair fund in France as well. So this goes through the ecosystem of accountability of producers. So that is in eco fees that are charged when you purchase an equipment. So that finances a fund that reduces the cost of repair.
Which is great. I also wanted to talk about waste at source. So let's look at groceries. So right now, when you go to a grocery store, you get a paper bag a lot of times, but in that paper bag goes your bread wrapped in plastic, your jug of milk wrapped in plastic, your sandwich that's wrapped in plastic. So when we're looking at waste at source, how do we handle food waste? What are other countries doing that we can implement into the circular recycling economy? How do we ensure that when it comes to food waste, we're also looking at recyclable materials?
A really interesting question. We did another study on this specific topic. So to us, there is a big gain to make if we talk about all the supply chain. Parce que souvent,
because often when we're talking about supply, we see packaging, which is used directly with foodstuff, but we can also reduce across the production chain and the distribution chain the amount of packaging that is used. So we think that we can optimize that in this industry, and we could also have some binding requirements. For example, in France, grocery stores that have a square foot of about over 400 feet, they have to propose wholesale products. So that is an option, and that could encourage a type of change in practice within the industry, and that would reduce the amount of packaging that is used.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. And Ms. Cote, Ms. Lapointe, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. My question is to Mr. Muggerman. The strategy on critical minerals is very important for clean energies, for electronic vehicles, and information technologies. And it is clear that rare earths are not unlimited, and so a circular economy would be very important here. So what is the initiative that Canada has to specifically reduce or reuse rare earths?
Je dirais que ça commence.
I have to say that it is just beginning. We have seen investments and initiatives in companies like Geomega for rare earths to recycle things that are found in wind turbines. And we also see the recycling of lithium in some economies. So that is another avenue that we can look into. Lithium is important in batteries, but we are also talking about cobalt, and there are also initiatives in place to recycle cobalt. But where we see more investment today and where we see a lot of focus is in research and development. There are many research and development programs to recycle strategic and critical materials. We have talked about research centers. We have talked about private companies like us. So these are The major changes that we have seen 5 or 6 years ago, this didn't exist. We saw that in the United States. We saw the huge amounts that were available for research and development for the recycling of critical materials. But today, we can see the difference, and I'm sure that in 5 years' time, we will see this research bearing its fruits.
Ms. Copton, I know you're here in your role with the steel industry, but in the past you have certainly worked with forestry, mining, construction, and so I want to ask you the same question as well. What initiatives has Canada put in place specifically to reuse critical minerals in e-waste?
So I can't speak to e-waste, but certainly what I can say is that there is, you made a very good point about research and development. There's been a lot of research and development that's been both private sector based, but also co-funded to support the development. I made a reference to, and I'm going to keep my steel hat on if you don't mind. I made a reference to the development of lightweight steel. And this is extremely important, again, to preserve the raw materials, to preserve the minerals and the critical components in steelmaking. You know, this idea of making sure that we're finding ways to create the same properties that are required, like, for example, in an automobile, there's certain properties that are required for safety and strength, of course. But to find new ways to chart new ground to get those same properties but with less materials. So that's a very real example of R&D doing what it can to support the development of, ensuring we're using as little of this stuff as possible.
And can you tell us how important it is that we work with international partners on this, and how are we doing in terms of working with our international partners?
Do you want me to respond to that or either?
To both of you again.
I think it's important. And I think probably the first important partner would be the U.S. They are the south border neighbor. And we see a lot of interest from the U.S. to develop together all those circular economies for critical and strategic metals. We saw that the Department of Defense in the U.S. opened the door to Canadian companies to apply for the same fundings of R&D that is open to U.S. companies. We still have not seen that from the Department of Energy in the U.S., which is the majority of the investment into this type of R&D. So that is something that hopefully the Canadian government could find a way to get the Canadian companies into there. Because those companies are working exactly on the same sources of material. The material that gets collected there can be recycled there or here, vice versa. The companies that are working together, they have more flexibility by putting more resources together. If only we are able to work within the Canadian community, we are limited. But if we are able to work with the Canadian research centers and the American companies, which often have much more cash to invest into those new processes, that opens the door significantly. And I think we are seeing that, but it should be, we should have more effort on this.
Okay. Ms. Copton?
I would only add that I think in steel, we need to choose our collaboration partners carefully, given the broader context that we have in steel around unfair trade and practices, which can actually apply to the supply of input materials for the recycled input materials into our processes. So as long as we're mindful of the broader perspective and in choosing those collaborations, and I think the U.S. is a very good example of working with a key ally and an integrated economy player in the North American context, this is a great suggestion. But for us, we would have we would have flags on who and how far and how wide we may take collaboration.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Lapointe.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lapointe. Mr. Lemire? You built a demonstration plant to tackle the issue of residue on bauxite in Shelville. So what I want to know is, what is the importance for Quebec and Canada to succeed in recycling these materials that are really dominated by China? I'll correct you, I have not yet built the plant. We are doing that. We are in the process of doing that for the rare earths. So in answer to your question, it's very important. If we look at the beginning of the rare earths recycling industry, it started about 10 years ago in China. They weren't doing that in 2010. And in 2018, about 30% of rare earth production came from recycling. So we can see that if we really put in some effort, we will be able to start the industry of rare earths only with recycled materials. And we can see today that we are making efforts to bringing the electric cars industry here. So we have to see how we can build everything here and not just bringing in parts that have been constructed in China. So we don't have enough mines here. We don't have rare earths mine that will give you the final oxides. So we have no choice. The best and fastest way is to use recycling. Secondly, recycling in China is still done in a non-green manner, and we don't want to do it that way here. It has to be clean. We have to develop methods that will not generate toxic residue. We don't want that here. As you said, we have a plant in Montreal. We cannot imagine having a plant that is causing damage even though it's recycling rare earths. We're trying to have zero waste plants. So that is what we're trying to develop. And we have very stringent environmental demands and requirements. So if we are able to develop economically viable plants, then we will be able to convince the rest of the world to use the same methods as us. Concerning bauxite residue, it's very interesting because, yes, here in Quebec we have alumina that is produced and the bauxite residue is produced. And bauxite residue has quite a bit of metals. It has alumina, iron, scandium, titanium, among others, and that can be used as added value. If that residue remains for tens of years, it doesn't add any value, and we would be losing. So today we have an opportunity to build a circular economy that will then give us an opportunity to add value to our economy. And I think Canada can become a global leader in valorizing mining residue. Thank you. Thank you for your answer. So to what level can scientific research and subsidies, how can they be important for you in this context? Let me give the example of Forion. For us, you can make a connection with the Technological Center for Mining Residue or even the Institute in Quebec, which has a lot of innovation in that regard, and even the Center of Excellence for Canada. Maybe you can work together to better integrate in our industry. Do you have the same need? Do you think that you need to have assistance in this regard to be a leader? I think you need collaboration between universities, research center, and the industry. The industry has a completely different focus from a research center. The research center is quite different, and the industry would bring forward a problem. And when that problem is there, you will be able to find a quick solution to that problem. Universities play a different role. Universities would bring about knowledge, and they would develop new technologies, and they build a base of new researchers and students, and that was going to develop research and development to take the technology to the next level. I also know that the industry, traditional industry, doesn't invest necessarily in new procedures that are completely different. They will invest in improving procedures. Meanwhile, research and development, just like us, would try to completely overhaul the process for the better. So that's the advantage. We try to change things to see how we process residue, how we perceive residue, how we can play with the metals that are being recycled or the residue metals, and see how we can produce new metals without having a problem that we have been seeing over 50 years, that is processing and still seeing waste with acids and all of that. We don't want that. Today, 2023, we are going towards the logic of extracting metals. Thank you for your answers that are quite constructive. Thank you.
Massé, I just want to point out I've heard a lot of noise around the room, around this table, and in the room, please, colleagues and everyone present, just be mindful of the noise when we have witnesses testifying. Monsieur Massé.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for Mr. McGovern, your intervention. Sorry I missed I had to take an important call, so I apologize for missing it. But I did want to follow up on one topic you mentioned, wind turbines and recycling. So in my area, Windsor-Essex County, there's been a significant amount of wind turbines added over the years, and I don't think there's been really much of a plan. And Ms. Cobden, you might have some comment on this too, because logistically, we've had to bring it in, like they're huge. And I'm just wondering, like, how far in advance do we need to plan about recycling? And I'm just wondering, like, are we going to kind of like the way we brought them in was like through ship and through rail and through trucks and through. I'm wondering whether or not we should be looking at a process of recycling them on site versus shipping them out somewhere else. So maybe I get both of your opinion on that, because I never even thought of that. I think they have a 40-year or 30-year life cycle or something like that.
It's the wind industry is a very interesting sector. You're absolutely right. It's appearing everywhere. We need to understand that the wind turbines, you're right, it's anywhere between 15 and 40 years. It depends on the type of wind turbine, offshore, onshore. From our discussions and working with the wind industry, we see that they have plants and they have companies internally that are already developing the process for recycling. The recycling is fairly straightforward. They dismantle, they want to recycle the blades, they have their own R&D groups that are working on how to recycle those blades and what to do with them. Okay. And of course, then it's a question of who pays for all this, right?
Yeah.
We find that if you look within the structure of the entire wind turbine, one of the components that has the most value is the magnet, where the rare earths are. So of course, they do want to capture that magnet, yep, and to use companies like us to go and recycle that magnet, get paid for it, and that covers the cost of dismantling. Of course, for them, it's very important to as well reuse the base, yep, because that base gives the roots for the next one that they will put 20 years later. Yep. So all this they kind of have an integrated circular economy, but they are missing that key piece. Where do the magnets go? Because if the magnets go into a steel recycling, just for the steel value, they don't get paid as much. So okay, what we are trying to offer goes hand in hand with the steel recycling industry, because for them it's very important to capture the steel, but they definitely cannot pay, the steel industry cannot pay what a magnet recycler will pay for that.
Okay, that's a great start. Thank you, please.
And I would add to that, if we really want to ensure that we capture value when we're recycling the materials at end of life, we should ensure that we're using the highest quality materials within it. And we were talking about this in our prelude to appearing here today, just on the margins of this, that, for example, Canadian steel and all of the benefits of Canadian steel, not just its jobs, but also its strengths, its inherent content, would help support the recycling of those turbines, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So, and as we are decarbonizing, we'll have more and more need for that material that is being returned into the recycling loop, right? But at the end of the day, if there's additional minerals in there, we have to make sure that we have enough value overall to be extracted in order to go at those additional minerals. So I guess, I would like to put a plug in that we are mindful about where our raw material is sourced from as we're building those turbines.
Yeah.
not just turbines, but solar panels, what have you, that we ensure that we are thinking comprehensively about the circular economy and, frankly, rewarding those that are participating in that and giving those higher value streams an opportunity to develop.
Yeah, and with that, does anybody know, like, could they do their on-site recycling there, like, or do they, like, for the wind turbines, or do they like collect them up and then, or I'm just wondering, because we have hundreds of them, and they're all going to sunset around the same period of time. I'm just wondering, are they melted down? Are they broken down? Are they chipped? Are they? Just curious in terms of the logistics of this too, or in terms of the.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure what they
Yeah.
would be doing on site. That
Yeah.
is maybe a really good question for the Canadian Association
Yeah.
of Recyclers. But from our vantage point, we would use that steel because there's,
Yeah.
you can melt down steel from anywhere and basically through metallurgy, repurpose it and make it used again with additional properties in other products. And that goes on in an infinite loop. Every time we melt, we improve the recipe, or we make the recipe according to the next product, and we just keep going like that.
Okay. Yes. Please go ahead. Yeah, no.
So turbines are dismantled usually on the spot. There are companies that specialize in it. Again, we are only entering the end of life for some turbines.
Yeah.
Considering the turbines the large volume started appearing around the early 2000s. By the way, those originally did not have magnets. They were done with a different technology, so they did not have rares. So once they're dismantled, the blades, for example, will go through a specialized process where they shred them, or they try and use them for some sort of composite material or additive materials. The steel will get processed and get shipped towards the nearest recycling centers, and there are steel scrap centers everywhere. And then what's happening now more and more, whenever there are magnets, so the magnets are usually collected separately into containers and get shipped towards a company that can recycle the rares.
Okay, so it's really interesting because I know I'm running out of time, but when we were building, I've been after this Gordie Howe Bridge. Like my first public meeting was like 1998 to build a new bridge, and they're finally building it. But also we did a whole new route to the new bridge, and what we didn't do is plan properly. So we actually shipped dirt hundreds of kilometers away when we could have actually had a proposal to save. I was working with the contractor, and there just wasn't, the government just wasn't interested at the time. It was too new. We could have used it for trails and other earthworks and stuff, and not put it into a landfill, and also not have the trucks with all the carbon emissions going. So we're importing dirt from somewhere else and shipping it out another way. So I know I'm out of time, Mr. Chair, but I'm looking for a lesson to be learned in that, because I don't think that anybody's really thought through other than what we just said. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Massé. So that concludes our first round. Moving into the second round, I recognize Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question's for Ms. Cobden. So you're competing, obviously, on pricing here in Canada, your members are, I should say, with a lot of imported Chinese steel. The recycling process that you outlined a moment ago to Mr. Massé, I presume adds some cost to the process, a cost which I'm assuming the Chinese steel doesn't go through in their home country?
Well, I would add the Chinese steel isn't as reliant on the recycling process as we are in Canada. So we've really embraced it. And so what that basically means is that our production is I think the number is about 5 times less greenhouse gas intensive overall than in Chinese steel. So again, another important point I was trying to make to Mr. Massey is that, that's why we need to be mindful about what types of steel we're putting in at the beginning, at the front end, and then at the back end that we're recycling back close to home where we're geared up to take that steel.
Is that also because the metallurgical coal that we use is of a higher grade too than probably what they're using in China to produce?
Yeah, so this is a different part of the production processes. So we use met coal and iron ore in a different type of facility than the electric arc furnace. But of course, that's another factor in why we are so much better from a greenhouse gas perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My next question is for Mr. Mugerman. Rare earths. It sounded like you're describing a process that is in development that you have created for extracting rare earths from our electronics and that kind of thing right now, and so that because right now we're very dependent upon China for rare earths in all electronic manufacturing. So have you developed a process where we can mine recycled materials and reduce our dependence?
Correct. So we started developing a process around 2017 for extracting the rares from the magnets that go into, well, pretty much into all the speakers that you see in this room, into wind turbines. So those magnets are used more and more in everything. So getting the rares out of the magnet and back into a new magnet, this is what we are trying to, the loop that we are trying to close. So we are not going to be producers of magnets. We are just going to be getting the different waste streams where those magnets are, so we can get the rares out and not have to depend on bringing those rares from China.
I know you're doing this already in a production facility?
So we are building right now the demonstration plant to be able to process 1.5 tons a day of this material.
Fantastic, thank you. That's great news. I do have a question for Ms. Cote, but I think I'm going to get out of time. So, okay, well, I have a motion to introduce. So, Ms. Cote, quickly, if you could, in about a minute, who is doing that you see across the country, which province is doing the plastic recycling process really well that we should be emulating?
Sur le processus.
With regard to plastic recycling process, well, the challenge with plastics is that plastics have become more diverse and more complex over the years. So the task of recycling these plastics has become more complicated. There is a broader accountability system in British Columbia that makes companies in charge of managing the packaging and the containers that they put on the market. So they are required to harmonize the packaging that they put on the market. But the real challenge is that 57% of packaging put on the Canadian market is not recyclable right now. So we're very far from an opportunity or the possibility of recycling them right now.
Too, from the Nova Scotia folks, that a huge amount of like those clam shells and things that you buy your cookies in aren't recyclable. If I could move a motion right now that we gave notice to, and I apologize in advance to the committee members. It was circulated with a couple of typos, so I'll try and correct the typos in my presentation. We gave notice last week that pursuant to Standing Order 108.2, the committee undertake a one-meeting study on the federal government's massive $14 billion investment in Volkswagen to build an EV battery plant in St. Thomas, Ontario. One, that the committee order the Department of Innovation, Science and Economic Development to provide the committee with an unredacted copy of the contract with Volkswagen. Two, that the committee invite the minister to appear for 2 hours to discuss the contract in camera. Three, that the meeting occur no later than Monday, May 8th, 2023. And four, that the committee receive the unredacted documents a minimum of 48 hours before the meeting. And would ask that the same typos in French on unredacted be corrected as well in my motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Perkins. So just for the benefits of our witnesses, we now have to discuss and debate the motion that's been put on the floor by Mr. Perkins. And we have a hard stop at 5 also to go in camera. So appreciate your testimonies, and I'll recognize now Mr. Fillmore.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I wonder if you would entertain a brief suspension just so we can understand the implications. I think there's nothing too out of line here at all, but we just want to make sure we understand it before we proceed.
Monsieur, I'll get back to this. Mr. Lemire.
Personnellement, je suis.
Personally, I'm ready to vote on it. I think I am for this motion. I just want to make sure that the correction is also in French so that it's linguistically in conformity.
Suspension, because we do have a hard stop at 5, so about 3 minutes, más o menos. Thank you. Suspended. have this motion from Mr. Perkins on the floor. As you can tell, it's been a very generous 3 minutes. I hope that we've come to a conclusion on this motion. So the floor is open for debate and discussion. Is there anyone who wishes to intervene? I recognize Mr. Fillmore.
Thanks very much, Chair. And I think we are don't find anything offensive overly in the motion overly, but we do see some room for improvement. And so we have good material to work with already, Mr. Perkins. But I think for one thing, I'll tell you what the ideas are, but then I'm happy to provide actual language and propose an amendment if we're able to get that far. But the first thought is that we would find value in also seeing the provincial documents. So the provincial contract, right? Well, we can ask. So I think the motion would be great if the motion asked for that. Yeah. And then the other thing is the kind of precedent that was set for this kind of document production in a case like this was at Public Accounts Committee regarding, I think it was vaccine contracts. And the way that worked was that there was a sort of a strict control over, no electronic devices. No, for example, you couldn't be emailed the documents 48 hours ahead, but you could go to the clerk's office and review them in a safe, secure environment, again, with no phone. So it's about protecting the integrity of the contracts and therefore the impact on consumer price. So those are the gist of the amendments. So I do have language that backs this up, and I'm happy to read it into the record. I can also bounce it to the clerk and sort of get it in a more formal way.
I just formally said that's no pending the wording. I'm sure the wording's fine, but that's okay with me.
Okay.
Those are friendly.
Just remind me, clerk, if you would, the email address. Is it indu@parle.gc.ca? Yeah. Okay, so that's sent. And then, so we would start with Mr. Perkins' motion, and then we would replace number 3 with the following number 3. That the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry and department officials, so that's an addition, be invited to appear for a 2-hour in-camera meeting, and that during the meeting, only committee members and support staff required for the meeting be prepared to attend, and that no personal mobile, electronic, or recording devices of any kind be permitted in the room during that meeting. That during the meeting, numbered paper copies of the documents be given to committee members who are present in person by the clerk at the beginning of the said meeting, and that these copies be returned to the clerk at the end of the meeting, and that the clerk be instructed to destroy the said copies, and that no notes be taken out of the room. Number 4 was good as it was. Then number 5, we would modify such that it reads, the committee received the unredacted documents from both levels of government.
Colleagues, I need to before we continue, I need to get unanimous consent so that we continue, I'd say, for 15 minutes, because that gives... Do I have unanimous consent? Perfect. Mr. Fillmore, you may resume.
Picking up, replacing number 5 as follows. So the new number 5 would be that the committee received the unredacted documents, that when these documents are received by the clerk, A, they be available at the clerk's office for viewing by committee members for a minimum of 48 hours before the meeting under the supervision of the clerk, and that no personal mobile, electronic, or recording devices of any kind be permitted in the room that week, and that no notes be taken out of the room. And I've sent that to the clerk.
I would just highlight that if the meeting is on a Monday and you say a minimum of 48 hours, just trying to, is that on the weekend, or it would be nice if members were around in Ottawa to go review these documents.
This is a fair point. Would you be willing, Mr. Perkins, to change to the 10th?
Sure.
Okay. All right, great. There we have it.
Yeah, snacks and beer.
Yeah.
Beer.
And number 6, snacks and beer. Yeah.
Everyone's heard the terms of the amendments proposed by Mr. Fillmore, and I see, looking around the room, that there's a consensus to adopt the amendments. And so now on the motion as amended by Mr. Fillmore, I see consensus around the room as well. So this is great. Wow. Thank you very much, Mr. Massé.
Separate scheduling note, has there been any thought about what we're doing with C-34, C-27, how much time we have left the schedule? I haven't checked my email, so it could be in my box right now, but for all I know, but just curious.
Given, Mr. Massé, that this would be committee business and we're still in a meeting and not in camera, I would suggest that we take this offline and we can have a chat on these issues, because we do have these two important bills coming our way, and we need to prioritize. So let's take it offline. And on this, I want to thank you all. This meeting is adjourned.
you.